Welcome, brothers and sisters, to the next episode of the Porn to Purpose podcast. Coming to you live here today inside the Porn to Purpose community on Facebook. And today, brothers, I want to focus on this conversation of the five essential keys, if you will, to maintaining our long term freedom from porn. You know, it's easy. Hey, Para, good to see you. Thank you for letting me know that you're here. Welcome, welcome. It's easy to come into this work, guys, and you know, approach this work like we do many things. Like say we want to go to the gym or we want to lose weight, right? We want to start a new diet or we're starting a business. Oftentimes, what we're looking for is we're looking for the tools, the tactics, the strategies, the techniques, right? And what I've found in my journey, guys, is that this is not so much about the tools, the tactics, the strategies, the techniques, right? It's really more so about a process of long-term lasting change in our lives. And that's what I want to kind of give you, brothers, here today, equip you with some of the essential pieces of the framework, if you will, the freedom framework that we provide for our brothers inside the Liberation Boot Camp that really provide you not just the tools and the tactics and the strategies and the hacks, but what is really the philosophy that supports us in our long-term freedom in this work? Okay. So I came up with this. I was doing some writing for an email that I was sending out to the Porn to Purpose community, and I was thinking, if I were to offer somebody like the five essential key components that might not be so obvious or might not be so evident when engaging in this work, when embarking upon this journey, what would they be? What would be like the five essential things that might not be so obvious or so evident? So that's what I want to focus on with you guys here today, is give you an inside look at what formula it is that's really required from my experience, from my own personal journey, as well as the the perspective that I have working with lots of men inside the Porn to Purpose community. Okay. So let's go ahead and begin in this conversation. I'm going to give you 5 points here today. If you are tuned in and you're able to, if you're able to, grab a pen and a piece of paper, I recommend that you take some notes here today and really uh, extract and write down the lessons, the insights, the nuggets that are coming up from you here today. For those of you who are tuning in here inside the chat, please engage as you're able. As I'm able, I will connect with you, and if we can answer questions live or anything like that, we'll do that. Okay. Um, so the first thing I want to offer to you, brothers, is something that's become more and more clear, more and more relevant to me inside of my own journey. And again, from this vantage point that I have in working with the men inside the Liberation Boot Camp, inside the Porn to Purpose community here, is that I kind of preface this as I started the conversation here today by saying that long-term freedom, guys, doesn't just come from the tools, the tactics, the strategies, the hacks. That's oftentimes what we look for whenever we go to work on this, right? We order the books, we watch the YouTube videos because we want, like, what's the tip that's going to help me get over this. What's the tip to losing the weight or quitting the cigarettes, right? That's kind of like the way that we approach these problems. And what I want to offer you here today, guys, is this idea that you can give a man a hammer, right? But if he's unskilled, he doesn't know how to use the hammer, then that hammer is worthless in his hand, right? So a big key to this work, guys, is recognizing it's not just about the tools, the tactics, the strategies, the tips. It's about a lifestyle. It's about a whole new way of living our lives. And that's the first point I want to emphasize to you guys here today, is recognizing that living a porn-free life is just that. It is a lifestyle. We have been conditioned, we have been trained, we've been brought up, we've been raised, right, to live life a certain way. We've grown up, many of us, or been exposed many years now to a life that's centered around screens, and this certain, like, way of living. And sex is around every corner. Oftentimes, and sex sells, and it's very much used to our disadvantage. right? Uh, there's and in today's society, like we're often looking for the quick fix. We're looking for, we grab for the junk food, we grab for the cigarettes, we grab for the alcohol, we grab for the weed, we grab for the porn, we grab for whatever it is, the easy low hanging fruit to kind of get that fix. And we've been conditioned, I think, to live life a certain way. And what we've got to learn, brothers, is that living a porn free life very much requires a lifestyle approach. We've got to learn to be vigilant with our attention, what we're giving our energy to, what we're giving our focus to. Everything is vying for our attention, guys, whether it's YouTube and the rap videos or the booty shaking videos or the Netflix or the video games or maybe the friends that are in our circle. Kind of it's like today's society in many ways is focused on BS, things that don't really serve us, for things that don't really fill us up. In fact, very often in today's society, uh, we are very much consumers of things that actually drag us down, right? And as my friend says, over the entirety of human evolution, our focus has been whittled down to this tiny little box, this tiny little screen that maybe you found this podcast through, or maybe you're listening to this podcast through, or maybe you're consuming this this conversation here live today. you know so what we have to learn to do, guys, is we have to retrain ourselves. We have to live our lives as very, very intentional men. We have to be intentional about the places and the ways in which we are investing and giving our attention. We have to become very intentional. It's like a life by design. It's the whole porn to purpose conversation. We must become purposeful men and recognize that everything is constantly vying for our attention. And it is our responsibility solely to be constantly watchful, to be constantly vigilant about where we are giving our energy, where we are giving our attention, where we are giving our focus. It comes down to the food that we choose to eat, the hours that we choose to keep. Are we exercising every single day? Are we taking care of ourselves in mind, in body, and in spirit? Inside the Liberation Boot Camp, we teach our brothers what's called the daily core four, which is a daily ritual, a daily habit, a daily regiment, if you will, of exercise, meditation, reading, and writing. And that's because every single day we focus on being very proactive and very intentional around our mental state, our physical state, our spiritual state, our emotional state. Because if not, if we go out into the world and we're not armored, if we're not armored in mind, body, and spirit, we're going to be susceptible and we're going to be reactionary to all the things that we go out there and experience. So learning that living a porn free is a life living porn free is a lifestyle. It comes down to, we also do this exercise inside of our work together. You can do it yourself. It's called clean up the field. If you notice, brothers, like if you're on TikTok, if you're on Instagram, if you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, as I mentioned earlier, sex sells, man. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And it's a slippery slope of, like, if you're tuned into this conversation here today and you sought out this conversation and you're listening, you know that, man, it is everywhere. And spending a little bit of time on Instagram or TikTok, which I've deleted off my phone. I always say 80% of this success could just come by if we could throw our phones out the window. Most of our problems would be solved, wouldn't it, guys? So spending any amount of time on those things, like, before you know it, you're going to see a profile, you're going to see a picture, you're going to see an image. There's going to be some kind of trigger that could lead to another and another and another, and it's a slippery slope. And before you know it, you're down the rabbit hole again. So in the clean up the field exercise, guys, we're constantly like weeding out the garden. It's like if you guys ever had a garden, right? You have to constantly weed that garden because the weeds keep popping up, right? It's like these things that are vying for our attention, focused around this conversation. It's like these sex, it's everywhere. It's constantly popping up. It's like whack-a-mole. We've got to constantly be tending to the garden, constantly cleaning up the field. It's not just a once and done thing. It's not just one tip. It's not just one tactic. It's not just one strategy. It's an ongoing thing. It's a lifestyle. We must be vigilant and constantly proactive around our energetic state, our emotional state, because whenever energy's low, whenever we're in an emotionally challenging place, whenever we're not mentally clear, right? Then we're more vulnerable to triggers. It's also in those states whenever we are reaching for the low hanging fruit, right? So this is a lifestyle, guys. It's a lifestyle. We've got to learn to live our lives as very intentional men. I always say we got to learn to like be ninjas in today's world because everything is vying for that attention. So this is a lifestyle approach, guys. Lifestyle approach. Okay. And I think as we continue on in the conversation here today, more of the ideas that I'm going to offer you here today are going to tie back into that more likely. But that's the first thing you got to recognize, guys. It's not just about the tools, the tactics, the tips, the strategies, right? It is also about it is about living life a different way. It's about a different approach to life, which is counter to the culture. Yeah, Mike says all social media platforms now are marketing to get people to other places like OnlyFans. Absolutely, man. You know, guys, I recommend everybody check out The Social Dilemma on Netflix. If you want to see the way social media is geared, like we think that we are using social media. No, in fact, brothers, social media is using us. That's a profound idea right there. Pause on that one. Go check out go check out we are the consumers of their product, you know. Yeah, that's why they call us users. It's like a drug, right? Good share, Mike. Thank you, brother. Ninjas, that's right. Warrior monk, I like that too, brother. Good stuff, guys. So that's it. Lifestyle. This is a lifestyle approach, guys. We have to learn to live life as intentional men. It's the whole porn to purpose philosophy, right? Becoming on purpose intentional men. Number two, guys. Number two, we got to recognize, guys, that this journey is very much a spiritual journey. This is a spiritual path. Now, I was raised in the Christian faith, and I'm an ordained Buddhist minister and mindfulness counselor, and I spent a lot of years in prison work, interfaith chaplaincy work, in hospitals. So I take this very interfaith approach to my life, to spirituality, and to the work that we do here inside of our community. So we've got brothers from all faiths, all walks, all traditions, and we honor it all. And this is a place where we can all come together and bring our unique stories and perspectives around that. So I don't teach any specific, religious, kind of dogmatic, ideology here inside the community, but we are very much a spiritual community. We are spiritually oriented men. I believe in many ways, guys, that this is like spiritual warfare. Now we could look at the bigger themes and say who's behind the scenes, right? But we won't get into that here today in today's conversation. But I believe that this is very much spiritual warfare in ways, man. Spiritual warfare. And as I mentioned, we were born, and I think part of the human journey, actually, in my experience, I'll say I know that the human journey, it's a part of this journey of waking up. It's like this journey of waking up in consciousness and awareness. Whenever we are younger, guys, we can't see the harmful effects of pornography. We couldn't see maybe earlier in our growth the ways in which um, porn was unhealthy for us, or the screens were unhealthy for us. We didn't recognize early on how social media was potentially detrimental, and TikTok and Instagram. We had to begin to awaken to these things. I always call this process, guys, like this process of evolution conscious conscious growth. We engage every single day, and we use the core four, such as I mentioned earlier. I told you these themes would tie together today. We use the core four, this daily regimen of growth, mind, body, and spirit, to grow ourselves every single day. We are intentional about our awakening. I think this is a journey of evolution of consciousness, man. Evolution of consciousness. So, however you want to slice up the conversation of God or spirituality, I find that as we grow, as we awaken, as we become more heart centered men, as we become more purposeful men, that is really the key to this. I think you could say, guys, from a non-religious perspective, and if you're a religious man, then you can apply it this way. I think ultimately what we're attempting to do by going to our vices, it's like they say the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, but that the opposite of addiction is connection. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety, but that the opposite of addiction is connection. And ultimately, we could say that ultimately what I desire to do is I desire to truly connect with my partner, my wife, my friends, right? To have real, true, meaningful connections and relationships in my life. But maybe ultimately, guys, what do we really truly want to connect with? Maybe ultimately we're trying to connect with God, with something higher. What about that idea? What about the idea that maybe through our addiction, ultimately what we want to experience is that bliss, that joy, that love, and we've been seeking it through channels that don't serve us anymore. Maybe ultimately what we're seeking is connection with ourselves. That's a lot of that work that we do inside the Point of Purpose community, is we work to really connect with ourselves and learn to source these things that we've been attempting to meet externally through our vices, guys. They're all similar: drugs, alcohol, food, cigarettes, unhealthy relationships. Right? We learn to source these things within ourselves. We learn to be more sovereign men and self-sourced. So maybe ultimately what we're looking for is connection, maybe with something bigger. Maybe ultimately what we're looking for when we go to porn is love, to feel better, to feel good, for a sense of relief. Maybe that's ultimately what we're looking for. So I think ultimately, guys, however you shape up the conversation of God for you, I think ultimately this is a journey for God. And if we could become men that are that are that are after God's heart, like that's our work, is just to become better men, more conscious men, more loving men, more noble men, to grow in relationship with our creator, source, the universe, whatever your word is for it, more every day, to be more like that every day, to be just like better men every single day. That's the path, man. I think that's the path. Out is through. I think, guys, that our addiction is literally a doorway to God, because I believe that ultimately what we're doing is it's like this is a journey where we come in one energetic frequency and one emotional state. You could say the emotional and energetic state of fear, of depression, of anxiety, of addiction, of sadness, of hopelessness. And the journey, guys, is just a journey up. It's like alchemy. It's like a journey to more love, to more wholeness, to more connection, to more goodness, to more joy, to more peace. That's ultimately what we're doing here, guys, as we are ascending in consciousness. We're getting deep here today, brothers. Would love to hear your feedback on this conversation. Mike says he loves the social dilemma. He said it's perfect. Yes, 100%. Thanks for tuning in here today, brother. So, end of the day, brothers, I think this is very much a spiritual path, a spiritual journey, a journey of growing in consciousness, a journey of awakening in consciousness, becoming more heart-centered men, becoming more noble men. You could say more godly men. And if we go that direction, these things that no longer serve us more easily fall by the wayside. And what's interesting, guys, as we embark upon this path, this spiritual path, and we are commit to our spiritual growth, it's really interesting that we begin to, like, I've always, my work has always been, man, how can I stop like fighting against myself and fighting against pornography? But how can I make this easy? Like, what's the easy way to do this? And what I found is that as I commit to my conscious, intentional daily growth, the things that no longer serve me just more easily fall by the wayside. It's like I don't have to fight them anymore. Just like when I used to smoke cigarettes, I smoked for like 10 years, and there was a time when I was up to like a pack a day. I remember the first day I smoked a whole pack of cigarettes. I was like, wow, but over time, as I continued to grow and evolve, I just began to kind of like, cigarettes just kind of like fell away, because I began to recognize, as I grew in consciousness around that they just didn't serve me. Actually, when I smoked a cigarette, actually was an energetic drag, and it kind of made me feel shitty. Like it wasn't great. I was like feeling good. Now I smoked a cigarette. Now my energy's kind of like tanked. I began to notice that. So I just began to recognize it didn't serve me anymore. It was easy to set down. I'd have to fight against it. One thing I did was I just stopped buying the cigarettes. I didn't have them in the house. And that made it a lot easier too. So in the same way, guys, as we grow, as we evolve in mind and body and in spirit, it's just easier to make the choices that serve us versus the choices that don't. You know. Mike says social dilemma is perfect. Yes, 100%. Yeah, absolutely, brother. Okay, so realize it's a spiritual path. Number three, guys, you could almost say these are not in any. I did order them, but you could almost say that these are not even in a particular order because they're all relevant. They're all important. Number two is craft your compelling why. The why, brothers. You could say this speaks to the porn to purpose journey. We're moving from this pit, this prison, this pain of pornography, addiction in many ways, sex addiction, however you're acting out, to lives of purpose, becoming more purposeful men. It speaks to the why, brothers. The why is the fuel to the journey. The why serves as the fuel to your journey. Now, here inside of our work, we break the why down into two pieces, brothers. We break the why down into two pieces. The first why, the first piece of the why, the first part of the why is the why part one. And that is the pain, that is the prison, that is the pit that we find ourselves in. It's like, what are we moving away from? What are we no longer willing to tolerate in our lives? What are we moving away from? What are we no longer willing to tolerate in our lives? If you brothers are here, you can relate with what it feels like to have relapsed. Maybe you've been doing good, you've got a streak under your belt, a couple days, a couple weeks, a couple months, right? And then you whatever happens and you talk yourself back into it. It's a choice. I always like to emphasize that, right? Taking full ownership. We choose to view pornography, masturbate, whatever it is, right? Relapse. And brothers, the what comes after that? It's the low vibe state, the low energy, the depression, the sadness, the disappointment in ourselves, maybe disappointment in those that we've let down, maybe had commitments to, maybe loss of productivity, maybe it was during work, maybe we were up late when we should have been in bed with our partner, but we were up late watching porn, right? Maybe we watched porn and then got to go hang out with our kids or something later today. Like, the icky, yucky feeling, guys, the feeling that's brought you guys to this conversation. It's that pit, man. It's like what are we no longer willing to tolerate? The toll on our relationships, the toll on our spirituality, the toll on our work and our productivity, the toll on our momentum, the toll on our health, the toll on our mental health. What are we no longer willing to tolerate? Getting really, really clear on that, guys. Going deep on that. Inside the boot camp, we take our brothers through many, many weeks and months of really getting deep on that why, and being really clear on that why. Because of course, we all kind of generally know what we don't want anymore, but getting really connected to that, like really allowing it to sink in, like opening up that wound and really being like, man, here is the pit that I find myself in. Here is the pain that this is and the suffering that this has created in my life. And here's what I'm no longer willing to tolerate. I'm not willing to come back here again. And that's like what we're moving away from. That's the why part one, guys. Getting super clear on that, I think, can I say, was holding that why close to our heart, because what happens, guys, is after a couple weeks, couple days, couple weeks, couple months, we forget about that why, don't we? That pain begins to diminish, and over time, we end up. Remember, I mentioned it's insidious. It's like the weeds start popping back up in the garden again. Before we know it, we're distracted, we're triggered, we're back on YouTube, we're back on TikTok, we're back on Instagram, and we're right back at it again. Say, what happened? It's because we forgot and we talked ourselves back into it. So the pain, what are we moving away from? And so it's very important to keep that very close to our heart. I actually created what I call a go-to no list. It's my go-to list for all the reasons I want to say no. My go-to no list. I put it in my phone, typically like right around a relapse, because that's when all that pain is the freshest and we can really capture it. So in those moments, whenever we are really challenged and we're really kind of struggling with that decision, we're feeling really tempted, going to that list and be like, man, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that again. Right? Because we forget the pain. The second part of the why, brothers, is the purpose piece. It's the paradise piece. It's the promise. It's the vision for our lives. It's what do we want to experience instead? I'm committed to no longer tolerating this activity, this behavior, the presence of pornography in my life, right? And what am I committed to experiencing instead? What's the vision for the life I want to live, the man that I want to be, the life that I'm called to live? It's that purpose piece, man. I find that a lot of men either have never taken the time to explore that vision for a greater life for the man that they want to be. P.S. It's inside all of us. There's an inkling in there for all of us, right? But so some men have either never taken the time to explore it, or number two, they have begun to clarify their vision, but they don't believe it's possible. They don't believe what they want is possible. So it's just like so easier. It's so much easier to stay in that habitual cycle, that pattern of continuing to repeat the same thing, because there's a sense of hopelessness oftentimes that accompanies a porn addiction. Things are never going to get better. So we reach for that low hanging fruit of dopamine once again. A purpose driven life, brothers, is such a fundamental key to this work. Being purposeful men, being intentional men. We talked about this at the beginning of our conversation here today, being intentional men. And I find as I grow in purpose, as my why becomes stronger, that there's less and less of a place for porn in my life. As I become a man who's about something important, I'm living a richer, fuller life, which I've created. I continue to create. And I've got things to do. I've got things that fill me up. I got things that are meaningful to me. I've got responsibilities. I've got responsibility to this community, right? Like going back there just is less and less desirable. It's like I don't have time for it. It's like if any of you guys used to play video games, right? There comes a point in many men's life where it's like, I don't have time to sit here for 3 hours today and play these video games. I got stuff to do. Same thing with porn, guys. Again, it's a natural byproduct of the men that we're becoming. And whenever we've got a clear vision for our lives, whenever we are tempted, whenever we are feeling that pull, it's like, say, no, I'm committed to this. I'm committed to this instead. But if we have never taken the time to clarify that vision for ourselves, then we don't have anything better to look forward to. We don't have a reason to say no. Yeah, Mike says, how many people out there relate to the idea of giving up on yourself and then go back to something like porn or alcohol or weed? It is so much easier, brother. It is. Again, that's where that hopelessness comes into play. That's where that lack of vision comes into play. Man, hopelessness. If we don't believe that something better is possible, of course we're going to go for what feels good in the moment. It makes sense. But we've got to learn to outsmart ourselves in that way. And we begin to go to work on ourselves. The whole latter part of the work that we do inside the Porn to Purpose community is really help men get clear on that vision and begin to move forward into that vision. So it's not just like, okay, here's your vision, but how do I begin to implement that and really create that full life by design? You know, begin to create it and begin to recognize like, oh, maybe it is possible. Maybe it is available to me. Maybe there is something more available to me. It's a big piece of it. And yes, Mike says we must learn to forgive ourselves. I could have definitely put that in here too. This is a process of radical self-love, compassion, self-care. It's critical. That grace, man. That grace. So very good, guys. Okay, so craft your compelling why. You got to get clear on your why, guys. That is your fuel for this journey, and it never goes away. It never goes away. Okay. Number 4, guys. Number 4. Cultivating emotional intelligence. We have other here inside of our community, a good man, a teacher, an author, a speaker, a therapist himself. Many of our community members have actually come via Dr. Eddie Caparucci, who has a book called Going Deeper. Shout out Dr. Eddie. He teaches this inner child work, and I'm actually certified in his work. I've gone through his process. And Dr. Eddie says that many men today are emotionally immature men. Many men today, one, lack awareness around their emotions. They lack an awareness around what's really going on for them emotionally, how to define it, how to know what's really going on, how to express it, right? How to feel. A lot of men lack that. I think that's from just our human conditioning, right? This concept of men having to be tough, calloused men going to war, fending for our families. There is a place for that for the man. But as a result of that conditioning, we've become shut down emotionally and emotionally unattached. So Dr. Eddy says that we don't have the ability to really identify or express our emotions. And number two, we also lack the ability to be present with our emotions, to feel our emotions, to process our emotions. Instead of feeling our emotions, instead of feeling sadness, loneliness, disconnection, anxiety, fear, we've learned to what? Cope and check out, escape using our things, using sex, pornography, drugs, weed, alcohol, video games, toxic relationships, food, you name it, right? And we've never developed the capacity to feel. I always say that children lack the ability to be present with their emotions. Whenever children are experiencing an emotional upset, what do? They scream, they cry, they throw a fit. But adults, healthy, conscious men, adults, have cultivated the ability to be present with their emotions, to process their emotions, to feel the pain, even though it hurts, and it's an ongoing thing. Right? I don't speak from a place of perfection or delusion of perfection, right? I'm working on it too. But lack the inability to be present, to feel our emotions. And brothers, it is in the feeling that the healing occurs. The healing comes through the feeling. So as we learn to be present with our emotions, learn to process our emotions and our needs. That's another one. We've been using porn to meet these needs. So becoming healthy, emotional men, cultivating emotional IQ, learning to be aware of our emotions and our needs, and learning to proactively be present with, process, and take care of our needs and our emotions. Critical, guys. Critical. And what is a good, strong, powerful, conscious woman desire in a man? A man who's emotionally mature, a man who can not only be present with himself emotionally, but a man that can be present with her emotional storm. You know, I think that's part of our role as men is to be, cultivate the capacity, the ability to be present with our emotions and also be present with the emotions of a woman, right? Not reactive to hers, right? So emotional intelligence, brothers. We could have a whole conversation on that one. Number three, I'm sorry, number five, and we're going to wrap up here, is community, leaning into community. As I mentioned earlier in today's conversation, I mean, you're here today inside community. As I mentioned earlier in today's conversation, the opposite of addiction is connection, community, guys. Porn is one of these things, brothers, that we deal with in the darkness of life, in the shadows of life, in the deep secrets of life, with our shame and our fear, our embarrassment. So porn is something that we hide in the darkness, have all this shame around, we deal with all by ourselves, we feel very lonely in. We are isolated in our relationship with porn. It's also isolating, right? And we're dealing with this like an island, aren't we? Dealing with this like an island in many ways. And I have found community to be a critical role in this work, guys. Getting around other men and just like recognizing, oh, I'm not the only weirdo. recognizing that there are other men, recognizing that, oh, I'm not the only one who has these thoughts or these feelings or these experiences or these tendencies, recognizing that there are other guys out there like me. Getting into community, brothers, also helps provide us perspective. We get into these stories around our relationship with porn, around our relationship with ourselves. Getting into community helps provide perspective, provide guidance, provide insight, provide direction. It allows us an opportunity to take these aspects of ourselves, you could say the shadow aspects of ourselves, which have been hiding in the darkness, and bring them out into the light. And as we do that, brothers, we begin to heal. We begin to heal. We begin to make peace with these aspects of ourselves. We begin to integrate these aspects of ourselves within ourselves in healthy ways. We get to share them with others. We get to remove the stigma and the taboo that we've created around them. And we begin to become more whole men. Community, brothers, is the wind in our sails when we're doing well. And community is the hand that helps us back up whenever we fall. I'm very intentional about the community that we've crafted and cultivated here, creating a community that is loving, that is supportive, that is non-judgmental, that is compassionate, but also strong and provides accountability. A community, brothers, critical piece of the puzzle. And I always say, even if it's even if you don't come into community, like if you join the Porn to Purpose community, which we invite you to do, even if you don't begin to engage right away, even if you could just begin to join and just like watch the conversation, begin to recognize that there are others like you, there are others having this conversation, and begin just like to pick up on some of the work that's being done. It's incredibly powerful, supportive, and useful. Community, brothers, critical piece of the puzzle. And I also say, as I always say, I'm not just the president, I'm also a client, like the hair guy back in the day. And that means I come from this work, guys. Several years ago, I joined a coaching community and hired my own coach in this work because I was recognizing the detrimental effects that porn was having in my life, and I began to recognize that I couldn't do it alone. I tried all my life and needed support. So I hired a coach, just like many of the men here inside of our community, and went to work on this. And I recognized, like, there was a period in my journey I was doing really well, and I fell away from community. I was like, oh, I got this. It's over. But I soon learned after a period of time that, absent of community, again, this is insidious. It has a way of popping back up. I stumbled in my own journey. And so that was like a learning lesson for me to recognize, hey, I got to stay, like, long-term community is a critical piece of this puzzle. I can't just go and get fixed and go away. For guys like us, guys who have a tendency around this, I think I really believe that long-term, lifetime community is like part of the prescription here. Staying connected to community long-term is critical piece of this puzzle. Because as we fall away from it, it's like, hey, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, that stuff's not going away, man. Those triggers aren't going away. This stuff is insidious. We have a tendency to let our foot off the gas and allow some of these habits and tendencies and patterns to slip back in. That's just the nature of being a human. So staying connected to community keeps us connected. It keeps this conversation relevant. It keeps it top of mind, and it keeps us sharp and vigilant. Critical. All right. So all that to say, I still attend my community work every single week with my community. Still on this path, still stay connected. I will say, over time, brothers, to give you brothers hope out there, as you engage in this work, as you continue on this work, on this journey, and you remain vigilant, the urges do diminish over time, and you also become more skilled and more equipped to deal with them. And I think at some point in our journey, like, staying connected, it becomes more of a maintenance thing. It becomes more of a maintenance, but there's always great intention with it. Okay. So I don't think we have to struggle and fight forever, guys. That's what I found. All right. So that's it, brothers. That's it. We're almost at an hour here today. Thanks for those of you that have joined in. Just as a quick recap, the five pieces that we've offered you here today: recognizing that living porn free is a lifestyle, recognizing it's a spiritual path, right? Being crystal clear on your why, being a purpose driven man, emotional intelligence being a critical piece of this puzzle, and leaning into community, staying connected to community as being essential. Brothers, we appreciate you for joining here today. Thank you for those that checked in and joined us in the chat. Please reach out. Let us know we can be of support to you in your journey. We look forward to seeing you soon. Peace and power to wherever you are in the world. We are noble men. Bye bye.